On the morning of my college graduation, my father sat at our kitchen table, a steaming mug of black coffee in his hand. He didn't look up from the sports section of his newspaper. "Don't embarrass us by going," he grumbled, his voice low and dismissive. "You don't belong there. A piece of paper doesn't change what you are. Open the shop at 8. The Reynolds account needs their copper fittings pulled by noon." He truly believed I was nothing more than a delusional clerk, playing a pathetic game of dress-up, destined to unlock the rusted doors of Lilly Supply Company, the failing HVAC business he'd spent a decade running into the ground. What he didn't know was that zipped inside a dark canvas duffel bag, tucked away in the trunk of my beat-up 10-year-old Honda Civic, was a graduation gown. What he didn't know was that while he slept, I had spent the last 7 years meticulously mapping out my exit. 3 hours later, the silver-haired provost of the university leaned into a microphone, his voice echoing through the packed arena. "And now," he announced, "the valedictorian of the business college." The crowd erupted. 10,000 people clapped, a thunderous wave of applause. And standing in the back concourse, held behind a velvet rope by two security guards, my father and my older brother, Trent, watched. They watched the girl they treated like a servant walk across the stage to take the podium. Welcome back to Revenge Order. This is where we share stories of quiet resilience, family justice, and the moments when the truth finally comes to light. Before we get into how I dismantled my father's empire from the inside out, drop a comment below and tell me how old you are. It's always fascinating to see the different generations tuning in. To understand how a girl forbidden from reading managed to secure a seat in the front row of an elite graduating class, you have to go back to a Tuesday afternoon 6 years earlier. I was 16 years old, with a perfect grade point average, a locker full of advanced placement textbooks, and a detailed plan to study data analytics. My father, however, had a different plan. He walked into my high school principal's office wearing his work boots and a grease-stained jacket. He didn't ask for a meeting. He simply sat down in the leather chair, pulled a crumpled withdrawal form from his pocket, and slid it across the mahogany desk. The principal looked utterly confused. He pointed out my test scores, my impeccable attendance, my undeniable potential. My father merely shook his head. "College is wasted on girls," he declared. He needed free labor. Lilly Supply Company was bleeding money. Inventory was lost, invoices were stacked in milk crates, and vendors were demanding payment. Instead of fixing his business model, my father decided to cut overhead by replacing his warehouse staff with his teenage daughter. The contrast in our house was not hidden, it was the bedrock of our existence. While I was pulled out of school to sweep concrete floors and catalog PVC pipes, my older brother Trent was enrolled in a private prep academy across town. Trent got a new Jeep Wrangler for his 17th birthday. I got a heavy canvas work apron and a set of keys to the loading dock. My father was terrified of his own mediocrity. He masked his failures by coddling his son, the supposed visionary, and suppressing his daughter, the cheap labor. I remember my first full shift at the shop. The air smelled of metallic dust and stale cigarette smoke. The front door had a heavy brass bell attached to the frame. Every time it opened, it gave a dull, suffocated thud. That sound became the perimeter of my world. Customers would walk in, ignore me, and ask to speak to the boss. My father would emerge from his back office, slap them on the shoulder, and bark orders at me to fetch their supplies. Trent would occasionally drop by after his classes, tossing his expensive leather backpack onto the counter. He would complain about how hard his macroeconomics teacher was, grab $20 from the cash register for lunch, and then leave. I would stand there, my hands black from handling copper wiring, and watch his Jeep kick up gravel as he drove away. I didn't cry. Crying was a currency I learned not to spend around my father. Tears were just proof that his system was working. Instead, I started watching the electronic scrapyard behind the industrial park. Local businesses dumped their broken hardware there. Cracked monitors, fried motherboards, frayed charging cables. I started taking my lunch breaks by the dumpsters. I dug through the bins, hiding the salvaged parts inside empty HVAC boxes. I realized early on that screaming matches would not save me, only leverage would, and leverage required an education. The transition from honor student to warehouse labor didn't happen with a grand announcement. It happened with the toss of a heavy canvas apron onto my mattress. My father stood in my doorway that Tuesday evening, his silhouette blocking the hallway light. "Put it on," he said. "The freight truck is arriving in 20 minutes. You are on the loading dock." I looked at the geometry textbook open on my desk. I closed it. I put on the apron. The fabric was stiff, smelling of engine grease and damp cardboard. That was the end of my sophomore year. Lilly Supply Company was a monument to stubbornness. The warehouse was 30,000 square feet of corrugated steel, baking in the North Carolina summers and freezing in the winter months. While our competitors tracked their inventory using digital barcodes and cloud software, my father insisted on carbon copy invoice pads. He kept customer accounts in rusted filing cabinets. He trusted paper. He didn't trust machines. And he certainly didn't trust the idea of a daughter doing anything other than moving heavy objects from one pallet to another. My daily routine became an exercise in physical endurance. At 6:00 the morning, I unlocked the front doors. I hauled 50-pound tanks of Freon across the concrete floor. I organized brass fittings, electrical contactors, and industrial capacitors until my fingernails were packed with black grime and my knuckles were perpetually bruised. My father spent his days sitting in a glass-walled office at the back of the shop, drinking coffee and complaining to his vendors about the declining economy. He was a man terrified of his own fading relevance. The business was sinking, losing contractors to modern suppliers who could guarantee next-day delivery. Instead of adapting, my father chose to rewrite his reality. He needed a king to inherit his dirt kingdom. That king was my older brother, Trent. Trent was 18. While I was stacking fiberglass insulation and coughing up warehouse dust, Trent was walking around in a navy blue blazer with a prep school crest embroidered on the chest pocket. My father had taken out a second mortgage on our family home to pay the tuition. When Trent turned 17, a brand new Jeep Wrangler appeared in the driveway. The financial hypocrisy was not something my father tried to hide. It was the governing law of our house. Trent would drop by the shop on Friday afternoons. He never wore an apron. He never lifted a box. He would lean against the front counter, tapping the keys to his Jeep, and tell my father about the networking events the prep school hosted. My father would nod, his chest puffing out with pride. He would open the cash register, peel 3 $20 bills from the tray, and hand them to my brother. "Take your friends to dinner," my father would say. "Business is built on handshakes, Trent. Remember that." I would stand 3 feet away, holding a clipboard with a list of back-ordered parts, calculating how many hours of my labor those $60 represented. My father's favoritism wasn't just about money. It was about a narrative. He was the self-made man, the patriarch, and Trent was his chosen successor, destined to elevate the family name. I was merely a tool, a means to an end. But my mind was a tool too, and I was learning to use it in ways they never anticipated. In the quiet hours after the shop closed, I began to piece together the salvaged electronics from the scrapyard. I taught myself to code, to repair, to build. My father had forbidden me from reading books, but he couldn't stop me from reading circuit diagrams and programming manuals online. My lunch breaks at the dumpsters became my secret classroom. One night, after everyone was asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen. The refrigerator compressor hummed a low, steady rhythm. I set a silver pen down next to the fraudulent contract I had prepared for Trent. I opened my backpack, pulling out my salvaged laptop. The screen booted up, casting its familiar blue light across the linoleum. I accessed Trent's student portal for the final time. He had a major term paper due for his senior ethics seminar at midnight. I opened the word processing file I had prepared for him. I highlighted the spun text, the paragraphs I had carefully altered to evade basic detection algorithms. I pressed a single key, stripping away my protective coating. I restored the stolen text to its exact original format, ensuring the plagiarism software would recognize it as a direct, unedited copy of a copyrighted academic journal. I left my embedded tracking metadata untouched, proving the file was generated on an unauthorized machine. I clicked Submit. The loading bar filled the screen. The file transferred to the university servers. The digital confirmation receipt appeared. The fuse was lit. The blast radius would consume Trent's academic career, his leverage over me, and my father's fragile ego. I closed the laptop lid. slipped the machine back into my bag, and walked to my bedroom. I had exactly 24 hours before the shockwave hit the house. The speed of institutional judgment is often terrifying when it catches you unprepared. Universities rely on automated academic integrity software that functions without empathy or hesitation. These programs scan millions of documents globally in a matter of seconds. When I submitted the unedited stolen text through Trent's portal, I knew the algorithmic flag would be immediate. The human review process would take slightly longer, but the outcome was a mathematical certainty. The following afternoon, I returned from my classes in Charlotte. The drive back to the house was quiet. I parked the Civic in the driveway and walked up the front steps. Before I even turned the key in the lock, I heard the shouting. The sound vibrated through the thin walls of the house. It wasn't the usual low grumble of my father's complaints. It was a chaotic, panicked screaming. I pushed the front door open. The living room was a scene of total collapse. Trent was pacing back and forth across the carpet, holding his mobile phone in front of him like a ticking explosive. His face was drained of color, his breathing shallow and rapid. My father stood near the television, his hands gripped into fists, staring at his son in disbelief. An electronic notification had arrived in Trent's email inbox an hour earlier. It wasn't a warning. It was a formal decree of expulsion. The University Academic Conduct Committee had reviewed the term paper. The detection software registered an 87% direct match with a copyrighted International Economics Journal. Furthermore, the forensic digital analysis revealed the document was authored on a device whose Internet Protocol address did not match Trent's registered location. And the metadata carried a distinct student identification number belonging to a different academic institution. The fraud was absolute, documented, and indefensible. The university terminated his enrollment immediately. His academic transcript was permanently marked with a violation of severe academic dishonesty. Trent saw me standing in the entryway. The panic in his eyes instantly morphed into a feral, desperate rage. He pointed a trembling finger directly at my chest. "She did this!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "She sabotaged me. She wrote the paper. She planted the stolen text." My father snapped his head toward me. The confusion on his face slowly contorted into a dark, heavy fury. He looked back at Trent. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "Why would your sister write your term paper?" The pressure of the expulsion broke Trent's composure completely. The golden boy, terrified of facing the consequences of his own laziness, confessed the blackmail to save himself. He admitted he had discovered my hidden laptop months ago. He admitted he knew about my secret college enrollment. He confessed he had leveraged the threat of exposing my education to force me to complete his entire online degree program. "I made her do the work," Trent yelled, pacing faster. "I outsourced it to her. She was supposed to handle it. She intentionally uploaded a stolen essay to ruin me. She wants to see me fail." He expected absolution. He expected our father to recognize his visionary delegation and punish the defective machinery that had malfunctioned. The dynamic in the room shifted. My father processed the confession. The reality of the situation was undeniable. His son, the heir to his dirt kingdom, was an academic fraud who could not pass a basic ethics seminar without coercing his sister. A rational parent would recognize the manipulation and discipline the extortionist. But cognitive dissonance is a powerful shield against a shattered ego. My father could not accept that his son was a failure. If Trent was a failure, then my father's judgment was flawed. His investments were wasted, and his legacy was built on a lie. The human brain will perform incredible mental gymnastics to protect its core identity. To survive the humiliation, my father had to rewrite the narrative immediately. He needed a villain. He turned toward me. The physical space between us seemed to shrink as he took a step forward. He did not see a daughter who had been blackmailed into academic servitude. He saw a jealous, vindictive subordinate who had maliciously destroyed his son's future out of sheer spite. "You ruined him," my father said. His voice was no longer a scream. It was a low, dangerous growl. He believed he was elevating his son, but he was actually stripping Trent of the resilience required to survive in the real world. Fairness in parenting does not mean shielding a child from the consequences of their actions. It means allowing them to fail safely, so they learn how to stand back up. When Trent was finally exposed to the unyielding metrics of the real world, he shattered. The parent who coddles the child out of a misguided sense of pride ultimately leaves that child defenseless. Then, there is the other side of the ledger. There is the daughter who was commanded to sweep the concrete floors. If Trent was ruined by indulgence, I was forged in the cold vacuum of neglect. My father looked at his daughter and saw only cheap labor. He lacked the emotional awareness to recognize the brilliant, meticulous mind analyzing every flaw in his failing empire. This is the danger of assigning rigid, preconceived roles to our children. When a parent decides in advance what a child is capable of, they stop seeing the child entirely. They only see the boundary they have drawn. But brilliant minds do not stop functioning simply because they are placed in the dark. They adapt. They learn to operate in the shadows. When you force a child to hide their potential, you teach them that the family is not a sanctuary, but a hostile environment to be survived. My story highlights a stark truth about the human spirit. Resilience is often born from necessity. Yet, no child should have to weaponize their intellect just to secure the basic right to an education. The turning point of this entire narrative, the moment the family fractured beyond repair, was not the screaming match in the living room or the dramatic boardroom rejection. It was the quiet, mechanical theft of a childhood savings account. Honesty is the bedrock of family responsibility. When an 8-year-old hands a $10 bill to her father, she is not just depositing currency, she is depositing her absolute trust. When my father drained that account to cover the legal fallout of his golden boy's recklessness, he did not just steal $8,000. He declared moral bankruptcy. He proved that the rules of fairness did not apply under his roof. In American culture, we place a heavy emphasis on financial independence and the reward of hard work. To steal the physical manifestation of a child's labor is to sever the deepest psychological tether between parent and child. It teaches the child that the world is inherently predatory and that the predator sleeps down the hall. We must ask ourselves what kind of ledgers we are keeping in our own homes. Are we raising our children with the emotional awareness to recognize their unique strengths? Are we holding them accountable with fairness and honesty? Or are we playing favorites to soothe our own insecurities? The traditional family structure is a powerful vessel for shaping character, but only if it is built on a foundation of mutual respect. When respect is absent, the structure becomes a trap, and as the story demonstrates, those who are trapped will eventually learn how to pick the lock. These are the quiet, often painful truths that resonate behind closed doors in neighborhoods across the country. They are the stories of survival, of balancing the scales, and of finding the courage to walk away from the systems that refuse to value us. If you found a piece of your own history reflected in this narrative, if you understand the silent strength it takes to break a generational cycle, then you belong with us. Drop a comment below to share your own experiences, and make sure to follow the channel Revenge Order. We are building a community dedicated to the pursuit of quiet justice and the profound clarity that comes when the truth finally comes to light. As the screen fades to black on May Lily reading a book in her quiet, sunlit apartment, we are left to confront the echoes in our own lives. We all grow up within the walls of a specific architecture. Some of us are handed the keys to the front door, while others are forced to find the hidden exits. But eventually, the children grow up, the house falls silent, and in that silence, every parent is left to face the ultimate audit of their choices. You must ask yourself, when the day comes and the ledger is finally balanced, will the children you raised return to the table to sit beside you? Or will you find yourself sitting alone in a glass room, wondering how the machinery you built managed to lock you out of your own life? The numbers always add up in the end. The only question is which side of the equation you will be standing on.